Hi everybody. In this video render video, we're going to take a look at what I think is one of the coolest new additions to Twinmotion, coming in Twinmotion 24.1.2, and that is the use of triplanar projections for UV wrapping your materials. Now, we're going to bounce into Twinmotion. We'll take a look at what this is and why I think it's such a big deal, and just talk about why I think it's a definite step forward for Twinmotion. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, everybody. So normally we don't do videos on sort of like incremental increases in programs, but I think this one is definitely worth taking a look at. I've got a basic scene here grabbed from the warehouse, and I'm in Twinmotion with Lumen enabled, and I'm looking at, say, for example, this couch. Now, I want to show you something really quickly. So say you've got this couch and you brought it in from SketchUp, and you're like, okay, I'm going to apply a Twinmotion material to it. And you do. And you'll notice, oh man, that does not look good. Ooh, in fact, it looks even worse than what was there by default. Now, maybe you're thinking I'll change the cubic UV projection. And you can see it's just as bad, if not worse. There's a couple of things to note here. UV projection and UV unwrapping in particular is something that if you're a SketchUp user, or probably I think like Revit and all those other three ArchiCAD type programs, keep hidden away from you. Now in the case of SketchUp, there are certain things that are hidden. Vertexes are usually hidden from the user, as well as anything to do with UV unwrapping. Now this is an intentional decision. As they currently stand, there are only two, to the best of my knowledge, plugins or extensions to UV unwrap an object within SketchUp. And a part of that is just SketchUp was never intended to be a full 3D program. But if you're going to other programs, you might need to be able to UV unwrap something. And so you can do this by hand in SketchUp or send the object to something else and like Blender and then bring it back to either SketchUp or Twinmotion. But either way, that's a lot of effort. And for a lot of people, if you were coming at like Twinmotion from perhaps a non-3D background, or you didn't go to school for it, you went to school for architecture, UV unwrapping is, you know, effectively sort of a professional skill. I think it is a standard skill, but it might not be something that you've learned in school. The ideal way to have your objects set up is to have them UV unwrap beautifully. But that's a huge amount of work. We're kind of relying then on Twinmotion to be able to just project materials on correctly. And you can see with a complicated object like this, it's just not working. So how does triplanar projections come in? Well, in the use of a triplanar projection, what you have is basically the texture map that you're assigned being projected from three different angles, and then the program is going to blend between the actual textures. Now, this is something that D5 has done for a very long time, and I've always wanted it in Twinmotion because some objects just don't look great. And so let's take a look at this fabric. I'm going to go Materials and Fabric, and we're going to drag out one again with an actual texture so you can see, which is going to be this fabric diamond, and I'm going to drag this out. Now you'll notice it is still showing up all of these very horrendous looking scenes. And so what we'll do is go to the right, and we're going to go to UVs, and you can see by default triplanar is off. And what we're going to do is just turn this on to world space, and there we go. Now, it is not perfect. You can see it is struggling a little bit right here, but all in all, especially if we take down the scale, you can kind of see from your camera, say being maybe back here, or if you're not looking directly at where that seam is, this is a gazillion times better looking. Especially for a shot like this, you can kind of see right there, it's working really well. Triplanar projection mapping is just a really cool way to do this, and it's very efficient. Now, a couple of other things to note about UV unwrapping really quickly before we leave it there. Some objects, for example, this vase over here on its right came from the SketchUp warehouse, had a texture assigned to it, but does seem to have UV coordinates. However, let's take a look at what happens if we put a material on it. I'm going to use this stucco facade. You can see as long as you have the object selected, I'm going to drag this out, does a pretty good job. Whoever unwrapped this did a pretty nice job, and I'm not using any of the cylindrical projection types. So for example, we could try cylindrical, but it'll probably be actually worse if we do that. So let's try this one. Yeah, you can see it's a lot worse. Generally speaking, though, objects that have UVs already, you can use the drop down for From Object UVs, and I'm going to just change this, and there we go. You can see it comes in a bit janky, though. So what's kind of curious about this is when you first apply a material to Twinmotion, it did seem to use the object UVs, but the second time we drag a replacement on, anytime we've changed this, basically, it's no longer doing that. So if you find yourself in that situation again, just go down here, and there we go, world space coordinates. All right. Hopefully that really kind of sells you on why this triplanar projection mapping is so very useful. And I think you'll actually use it quite a bit. Now, there's one other thing I wanted to mention on this, which is randomize UVs. I'm going to go back to my library, and I'm going to go to materials, and we'll just, again, just for example purposes, let's do plaster. And for some reason, this decorative element has got construction rubble plaster. Horrible. Okay, one last thing to mention is randomize UVs. Now, generally, this is meant to be intended for ground planes. So in other words, that if, for example, we take a look at our floor here, say we just put, I'll do the same, construction rubble on the ground. You can see when I place it, it's not projecting correctly. Go to cubic. And for some reason, I'm having to do this. There we go, where we change. There we go. Now, you can see it looks very tiling. It's repeating quite a bit, and that's not ideal. So randomize UVs will actually just do that. It just randomizes the arrangement of the UVs, and you can see we turn it off very samey, especially if we adjust the scale. Take a look at this really quickly. There we go. I'm repeating. You can see the same elements repeating versus randomize UVs. All in all, I think these steps, particularly in 2024.1.2, is a great leap forward for Twinmotion. It was this lack of triplanar mapping and the limited UV options in Twinmotion were one of the major criticisms that we had when we did the comparison between Twinmotion 24, Lumion, and D5 Render. Now, there's still one element that really Twinmotion is lacking, and that is the edges and edge smoothing. But ultimately, that's an issue for another day. Anyway, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. Thank you so much for watching this shorter video, and I'll see you in the next one.